Howdy and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Zoe and I are here once again on Monday, March 3rd. So we're talking about March 3rd through March 9th.
Happy March.
Happy March. And March is the first really wacky month of the year, which I know sounds crazy to say. But astrologically, this is the month where the eclipses, get started. The new moon that we're just coming out of is the lunar cycle that includes an eclipse, and the retrogrades are dovetailing over each other. So it sounds wild to say that March is going to be a bumpier month, but I will say that this week less so, and then the shit starts to hit the fan towards the middle and the end of the month when we move through an eclipse and the retrograding, do-si-do that Mercury and Venus are doing, et cetera. So the later we get into the month, the bumpier. Before I get to the question, just a quick nod to one of my favorite classes that I teach, Finding Your Voice. We started this past weekend, and I always keep the registration open till Tuesday because people often work with the recordings to get through my classes and don't always come to live, Saturday morning classes. I keep the registration open for just a few days after we start. So if, exploring a way to step up into a stronger use of your voice at this time sounds good to you, check out that class at michaellennox.com. Catch up and join us. We're having a blast. So I got a question from Gina, which I really was excited because I'm going to get to talk about the ages and the Kali Yuga, some fun things in astrology to talk about. So let's get to the question. Hi, Dr. Michael and Zoe. I hope you're both well and staying grounded as centered as possible during this tumultuous time. And indeed, we are doing our best. I have a question about the 2,000-year cycle. In your Astro Alert full moon in Leo, February 12th, 2025, you stated, we have entered the age of Aquarius, leaving the unconscious age of Pisces behind us. The forces that were able to forge a patriarchal world 2,000 years ago are evolving out of existence. Aquarius is generating the next 2,000-year age, one in which peace for humanity reigns and all human beings are cared for. What we are experiencing now, especially in the United States, is an extinction grab. So those are my words, right? So,
right.
And many of you probably read them. If you're listening to this podcast, you might also be on my mailing list. Yeah, that this idea of the old guard grabbing for supremacy after, the tilt of the world has leaned in the direction of true diversity, it will pass. Now, I don't know if it'll pass in 2 years, 20 years, or 20, beyond my death or not, right? So when I say extinction grab, some people might think I'm talking about like this administration. No, I'm talking about archetypal move. Yes, humanity at the level of the ages. So lest you think I'm talking about this year, next year, I'm not. I'm talking about the large movement of how the human race relates to each other that transcends my lifetime or your lifetime. We are in the new age, and the extinction grab of the old is what we are living through. And so she writes tumultuous times. That's the tumultuous time. So I'm going to describe what the ages are, how they work, and talk about the sort of last three and the one we're in. So let me see if I could do a good job of this to use my words to help conjure an image in your mind. So the Earth is on a tilt, right? It's not straight up and down. It's got this 23-degree angle of tilt. In fact, the tilt is what makes everything happen here, right? It creates seasonalities, but it also sets up a wobble in the orbit of the system through the sort of neighborhood of the Milky Way that we inhabit, such that there's this backward movement over roughly 26,000 years where the sort of North Star point is no longer where it was because we're moving inside the ecliptic over thousands of years of time. I've lost some of you already, but let me say it another way. We have this thing called the North Star, and we use it to navigate, right? It is our dead sort of center of that's where we're going. That's true north. And that star is Polaris. But 2,000 years ago, it wasn't Polaris. North was a different star because we move through the fixed star neighborhood in this 26,000-year orbit that translates to spending 2,000 years in each sign, moving backwards through the zodiac. And so the age of Aquarius, what that means is, in this Kali Yuga 26,000-year orbit, we are pointing towards, that's the best language I can give because I'm not a physicist. I'm not Neil Tyson deGrasse or whatever, however you order his names. I can't give you the clear, cogent language of physics because I'm not a physicist, right? So hopefully you're with me now that the ages aren't random. They are orbital. They connect to our orbit in the galaxy. So they're talk about our higher self, right? Our humanistic self is what's being expressed there. So I'm going to go back 4 ages to the age of Taurus. So roughly 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, we were in an age that's ruled by Venus. I like to say that Taurus invented the Earth herself. Like in the lovely elegance of the zodiac, we get the void of Pisces, the I am presence of Aries, and then Taurus comes in right after and says, well, where am I? Where are you doing that I am? Well, you're doing it here on Earth. So in the First Nations peoples around the globe in that age were worshiping the goddess, pagan-like responses to the movements of nature and the earth to find our divinity. Something that's important to mention about that, by the way, is that anthropologists have information about First Nations countries in the Americas when colonization was happening, that about 80% of First Nations communities were matriarchal and about 20% were patriarchal and warrioristic. So it would be false to say back in the age of Taurus, everything was just yummy, feminine, goddess worshipers, because 20% of the tribes around the nation are going to be the opposite, warrioristic. When we move out of the age of Taurus and into the age of Aries, that's Moses. So Moses comes along. I'm not talking about historical accuracy of the Bible, kid. I'm talking about an idea that took us from multiple gods in the age of Taurus to this rising up out of the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, this monotheistic sense of God. No, it's not many gods. There's one God. But make no mistake about it, those peoples in the Middle East who formulated the one God in the age of Aries were a warrioristic masculine tribe. And so that sort of counts when colonization comes through. We move into the age of Pisces when Christ comes along. Now, again, I'm not talking about the veracity of was Christ real or not? Was he a person? Is he a son of God? What happened 2,000 years ago was the message about divinity was, oh, yes, there is one God, but it's inside you. It's not up there. It's not out there. Now, here's where my rage against Christianity comes from, because it is through Christianity and the unconsciousness of the Pisces archetype, that a warrioristic tribe in Northern Europe who had the physical resources to make ships and use the sea to navigate around, warrioristically moved around the world. This happened at the very end of the age of Pisces. We're talking about like the last 500 years. But make no mistake about it, through the unconsciousness surrounding the idea that God is one but inside of you, they mismatched that message and we lost it. And what rose up instead was an unconscious expression of the warrioristic desire to conquer. And of course, because it was Europe that led this, we are now living a white man's dream. That's why the diverse world, that is the hallmark of the age of Aquarius, is that we are diverse. We celebrate our diversity. We come together in a one world unity. So the unconscious Christian patriarchal horribleness is trying to say, no, 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 we will not let that happen. The United States is a perfect crucible for it.
Yeah.
All right, out of politics, back to the ages. So the last thing I want to chat about is like, well, when did the age of Aquarius start? And I get asked that a lot, and people expect the answer to be astrological in nature. You know, that it was this formation or that harmonic convergence here, the harmonic concordance there, or some, eclipse season. Don't look to astrology to measure the age because it's so slow. The ages shift over hundreds of years. And for my money, when the Industrial Revolution started to shift people out of the earthy farming consciousness and focus towards urbanization, that was the beginning of something that could not exist when there were no huge cities. Age of Pisces. But once people started to gather in cities, you started to create a larger experience of the collective consciousness of individuals working together, creating consciousness of community. So once we got into the world of computers, now the age of Aquarius is like opening up. So the heralding for me of age of Aquarius is here is like the 1960s and early 70s when computing started to explode in places outside of just big scientific labs, and then college campuses had them. And, it wasn't long after that everybody had a computer in their home, and now they're tiny and we slip them into our pockets. That's the age of Aquarius. It's a technological age. I believe that the murder gene in the human organism could be removed through technology that's being created right now that would lead us into a future where technology leads. It's a world none of us today would recognize. Most people would say that age is going to be devoid of like depth and humanness and wetness, and it might. Right. I'll be dead. Who gives a fuck? I just want to try to help you all get there by marshaling in your inner process at this time where we're helping the new age come alive so that we can all help and be supportive of that without being pummeled by the undertow. So there's only really three things to talk about today, and all three of them are about the retrograde cycles. As of this moment, as we start this week off, Venus is retrograde, and she just turned around. Mars is direct, but he just turned around. And Venus is in his shadow for his retrograde cycle that starts in a minute. So before I break each one of these down with specifics and details, just that alone is something to consider about how you're going to be feeling during the week ahead. Similar to the last couple of weeks, when you have all of the personal planets in some version of a retrograde, then we're going to feel some sort of way in our bodies and our minds and our hearts because the planets that represent those aspects of our being are in this weird process. So let's start with Venus. She just turned around on Saturday, right? So she has been at 10 degrees of Aries since February 23rd. And she's still at the 10 degrees of Aries, though she turned around on Saturday. This is called the station. And she stays here until Saturday. So the station is February 23rd through March 8th. Just understand that during that whole period of time that we're kind of like halfway through right now, when the emotional body planet isn't moving, then our emotions are going to feel a little funny because how we process is going to be impacted. If you have any planets or points at 10 degrees of anything in your natal chart, it would be worth your while to take a look at how this 10-degree Aries station of Venus is touching your chart. Like, I only have one planet that's anywhere near that degree point. My Pluto is at 11 degrees of Virgo. So that's an inconjunct. That's the great eliminator angle. Pluto holds the shadow. So I've been in an emotional process of thinking about and feeling into the ways love is showing up in my life. And then there's been experiences that I've had in the last couple of days and will probably expect a little more of that sort of force me to look at underlying motivations that are behind my desires to connect with others in love and intimacy. So that's like my example. Look at your chart and see any 10 degrees. So that's like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 degree points. And if you could figure out the angle that Venus is making, that will give you some information about how you've been feeling some kind of way for the last week and the week ahead. Once we get past Saturday, Venus will get to 9 degrees of Aries, and then she's, up to her retrograde in earnest. And just as Mercury is doing in his retrograde, and Saturn and Neptune are doing in their movements this year, all of the juice of these retrograde cycles are the idea that Venus, in this case, Mercury, in a bit we'll talk about, are crossing over between Pisces and Aries. Yeah, back at the top of February, around on February 4th, Venus moved into Aries. And so for about 4 weeks now, we've been having the experience of a slower passage of Venus in the sign she's most uncomfortable in. You could think of Venus as love, and because Aries is the sign of fighting and war and enmity and action, Venus is uncomfortable here, to say the least. So the message of Venus's entire cycle is she marinates in the Pisces bath of water that she loves so much, the sign of her exaltation, where love and forgiveness and compassion are something we don't even have to reach for. They are right there in our hearts. And then it just burns off when Venus moves into Aries and she just is all on fire. And so the message here is going to be our heart centers in a few weeks are going to tell us, oh, no, we've got to get back into that forgiveness and love, because if we're going to move forward into a year that is challenging us with change and transformation, and part of that is going to be facing violence and anger and polarization, we want our hearts to be as forgiving and loving and compassionate as possible so we can face those difficult moments with a heart that's a little gentler when faced with conflict. It's ironic that while Venus is in the sign she hates the most, Mars is in the sign he hates the most, Cancer. And it's interesting because both placements relate to anger. Like Venus in Aries can't handle the anger there because it's unlike her nature. Mars's nature as integrated anger, righteous anger, and owned anger can't move in Cancer. It's like mommy invites him in and says, sit down, and then winds up tying him to the chair. So there's rage with Mars in Cancer. And not for nothing, Cancer also invented memory. And so Cancer remembers everything. So Mars in Cancer not moving might have had a lot of people like boiling in their own angry experiences. I certainly knew from my own experience and others that the body was expressing a lot of challenges with Mars not moving at 17 degrees. Now, he went direct on the 23rd of Feb, so he's been direct for a while now, and I will say I felt that immediately. Part of why I felt it immediately is because my Mars is at 17 degrees of Libra, and Mars in Cancer was squaring my Mars for the 2 weeks before the direct station and for the 2 weeks out. Mars is still squaring my Mars, and I'm on like week 3 of that. And Zoe, you know me well enough to know that I can be irritable.
Yeah.
I have been so
easy.
irritable. Yes, it comes easy to me. So know that, kids, if you're feeling some kind of way, either in your body or with anger or with work and movement of projects that feels frustrating, we are in movement because Mars is direct. But until we get past this weekend, Mars doesn't have any real momentum because he's still at 17. He will hit 18 on Saturday. And then while he won't be moving at his regular pace, because he is direct, there'd be like a growing momentum day by day by day by day after Saturday of, more of our energy returning. And of course, it's going to be really important to pay attention to the moments of wrap up where Mars might be hitting a transit that he hit along the way for the third and final time. So that will be between now and May 1st. We get to not only wrap things up, but sort of have movement where we might have been in some delay. And of course, along the way, he will leave Cancer and enter Leo, which will be a major moment in the wrapping up of his cycle, which we will talk about when we get there. Okay, so the fact that Mercury is also in a retrograde cycle at the same time is just really uncanny. It's uncanny that Mercury and Venus are going to gather together at the end of the month and backtrack into Pisces together. Mind and heart, who are always a little at odds with each other, but have the desire to line up. Like we want that. We want our hearts to match our minds. We want to be in alignment with what we're feeling, to know what we're feeling. We want what we're thinking and how we feel about it to be in the same room. We certainly can't create very well if what we think we want isn't matched by a feeling in the heart. So that when Venus and Mercury do a little dance like this, we get to anthropomorphize their experience. So it's like Venus out there burning up in Aries. Mercury, who's just fine and comfortable in Aries, will sort of crunch up to meet her at the end of the month, say, hey, honey, I see you're burning up. I'm heading back to the waters of Pisces. You want to join me? And she'll like, yes, I do. And mind and heart will gather together in this deep retrograde process and enter our unconscious together at the end of the month, wrap up what they're going to do in the underworld, and then bring us into very new consciousness when all of these cycles finish. So it's beautiful what the 3 retrogrades are bringing us through. But at this moment, we're in the cross paths of them, generating sometimes uncheckable weird feelings. Like that's why I use the phrase like all the kids are using. I feel some kind of way, right? Because, in fact, I said in one of my dailies the other day, I was like, I don't know how to interpret this. And because it was one of the Mars weird things, right, that I'd never seen before. She said, well, if you don't know how to interpret it, like, we're in fucking trouble. I had to laugh. But it's the same kind of thing with this. It's like, I don't know how you're going to feel, but I know with the cross-hatching of these retrogrades, you're going to feel some kind of way. And your job is to just be still enough to be learning about how you're moving and choosing and acting and doing Mars, how you're loving and connecting to others, Venus, and how your perceptions need to be aligned with how you're feeling in your heart. And we're in deep process around this. So today is the day that Mercury moves into Aries. So Mercury has just, as you're listening to this podcast, Mercury has just crossed the birth canal of the zodiac, the last degree of Pisces, the sign of all formlessness and possibility and potential, and into the world of form today. So mind is a little bit more on fire. Our communication gets a little bit more assertive. And this cross-hatching between the two signs might give you a little information that might be part of your Mercury retrograde cycle story. I'm sort of making this up just to make the point. Mercury in Pisces might have kept your tongue soft and gentle, and Mercury in Aries might fire you up with rage that's greater than is going to be effective for you. So same thing. Mars on fire in Aries will say, oh God, I got to get back in the pool. In the spirit of taking a look at the triple transits that Mercury is going to engage in, right now, this Monday, this past weekend into today, Mercury is going to have conjuncted North Node and Pisces. That's like over the weekend behind us, where in Pisces, Mercury's marinating with connecting with spirit, conjunct Mercury, knowing where we're going next, conjunct North Node. Then today we get the fire added to the mix, and you want to include that in your pay attention to how you're thinking and perceiving, because if it was dramatic, it will be part of the retrograde process as well. Pay attention to the 5th, which is Wednesday. That's the day that Mercury will sextile Pluto, which for me is the heart of the transit's capacity to transform your thinking, your perceiving, and your use of your voice. Mercury is the voice. Pluto is the shadow, the underworld, power and authority struggles. And when you put Mercury and Pluto together, you're talking about, well, if the geometry is difficult, you're talking about really big problems of power and authority and, low vibe communications like passive aggression and manipulation. But when the geometry is productive, then they're both able to work with each other perfectly well. Mercury in Aries says, I got so many ideas and I'm on fire and it's a little too much. And Pluto says, let's transform how you're thinking and what you're thinking into a clear vision of what you want to yell about. And you might get a hint about that as we move through this week. Mercury goes retrograde next week. I think it's Wednesday, the 14th. So next week, we'll be talking all about the dance between Mercury and Venus, because next week is when they do it, right? Mercury turns around on Wednesday, right, 2 degrees away from Venus, and then that's when they start their backtrack together, and then, entering Pisces as a couple. What's important to remember if you're like a listener and you're tapping into the way I use astrology on a regular basis, it's important to remember that the personal planet movements hits everybody in this collective yet individual sort of way. In other words, all of our minds, all of our hearts, and all of our physical body experiences are being rewired. But how I'm experiencing that is not how you're experiencing that. There's the overall themes that go along with Mercury. It's very much about moving forward powerfully. Conjunct the North Node, conjunct Neptune for spirit there. The sextile from Pluto that's next week is the power surge of the Mercury retrograde with a little hit to Uranus that makes it unstable. So this is also important to remember, especially if you have challenges with Mercury retrograde cycles and you're like, you're going, oh, fuck, I don't want Mercury to turn around. The blessing of how profoundly healing the Venus cycle is and how strengthening and fortifying the Mercury cycle is? When you put them together and the fact that they are going to pull back into Pisces and then reemerge again after they've done some work helping us rewire, that's really like a birthing of a new alignment for all of us, mind and heart, ready to be on fire and take on the challenges of the world with your big, newly activated voice, but with a heart that has more compassion, love, and empathy in it than it did last year. Bumpy process, very individual. Pay attention, pick up a journal if that'll help you keep track of things that are happening day to day so that when I come at you with dates to look back at, you have some data and information about what you were feeling on a certain particular day. And just, fasten your seatbelts for eclipse season because it's going to get a little crazy as the month ends and we move into April. But we got this. I believe in us and I believe in our resilience. I'd have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This is just a really short dream, question about a reoccurring dream. We have an email in dream/question from Michelle. And Michelle writes in, "Hi, I'm so excited for the opportunity to hear your insights. I'm middle-aged, and since childhood, I've noticed a reoccurring theme in my dreams. Whenever I dream about getting married, I either have no details about the wedding and hate that I've not been involved in the planning, feel extremely disappointed about who I'm marrying, or both. Why?" And then she has a laughing, crying emoji face. Thanks in advance, Michelle.
Yeah, one of the things that's sort of juicy about dreams and really scary circumstances, something that we might declare as awful or illegal or dangerous or horrible in waking life can sometimes be a beautiful symbol in the dream world. Death means rebirth. If you kill somebody, it's about you taking charge to make a change with some thought form that lives in you. If you're killed by somebody in a dream, that might be surrendering to change that's coming along. So it gets kind of fun to talk about, really awful experiences, but imbue them with positive meaning. Because I think it's what helps us grow and evolve day to day, that in our dreams. And so that's why I think the dreams are always for us. So, yes, I get that Michelle is giving the, crying, laughing emoji because this sounds like it's frustrating. But I'm wondering if part of why it's a frustrating dream to be having is that she might think it's about marriages or intimacy or relationship, and I don't think it is. I think it's about control and feeling like she can move through changes with some agency that she absolutely cannot have because human beings don't have as much agency as we think, and control is an illusion. Mm-hmm. This is why I say that, because the essence of the dream material that she's presenting to us, the emotional content, is the frustration that she's not been involved in the planning.
Right.
Right. That's, to me, when I heard you read the dream, if I were giving the sort of telephone, version of it to the next person, the theme would definitely be, she's not happy that she didn't get to plan this wedding. So weddings are about union, about integration. So they're not about relationship, unless you're having a relationship experience in life, and a wedding dream might be reflecting something of that experience. But in a pure universal sense of what does marriage mean, it means two energies that are unlike each other merge, integrate, and become a new thing, a transcendent third. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about the transcendent third in full moons. The sun is in an archetype, the moon is in an archetype. They oppose each other, and in the opposition of them, this new thing is created. Yeah, we are a transcendent third. The father god of the sun, the mother goddess of the earth and the moon, come together in a dynamic yin-yang of two different kinds of energy, masculine and feminine. We are the transcendent third, that is life, that exists because there is a sun and an earth. So Michelle is dreaming recurringly about integration moments where perhaps something's happening in an integrated way, the marriage, but not being involved in the planning, and that creating like the laughing, crying emoji to me is about control over the things you can't control. Like she's already there in the wedding, meaning it's done. I'm getting married. The change is upon me. And if I haven't planned it, then it's some kind of a surprise that came out of nowhere. So what's the message behind I wish I had planned it is I wish I had control over how this would have looked or been or gone down.
Yeah.
So that to me is the bigger thrust of why this dream might come up in Michelle's life from childhood on. You might say, well, I didn't know what marriage was as a child. It's like, yes, you did. You knew about your cultural zeitgeist when you took your first breath at 0 minutes old. You were imprinted in the life where you were going to be planted. It was inevitable. In media, kids see marriages in media, from the time they're 5 or 6 years old. So she points out that she's middle-aged. She doesn't say whether she's partnered or not, but even...
Oh, true.
Right? I would even say her presenting to us that she's middle-aged might suggest that she thinks that this dream is coming up about her intimacy, relationship, either desires or experiences, and I don't think it is. I think it's about, I didn't plan to get here, so now I feel out of control.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I want this, sort of thing. Really interesting dream. And if I've missed the mark, Michelle, let us know. But I think we're in the right room.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.